When we're publicly humiliated, especially by someone rude, aggressive, or cutting, it doesn't just hurt in the moment. It lingers, it loops in our heads. We replay it, obsess over what we should have said or wish we'd reacted differently. And sometimes we internalize the embarrassment. We start telling ourselves the story they tried to write for us. I looked weak. Everyone saw that I had no comeback. Maybe I did something to deserve it. That is the trap of shame. And here's the truth. You don't owe anyone a perfect response to disrespect, but you owe yourself the right to own your experience, even the parts that make you cringe. Owning your story doesn't mean celebrating what happened. It doesn't mean pretending you were fine. It means standing in your own truth, even when your knees shake. It means saying to yourself, that moment hurt. It wasn't okay, but it's part of my story now, and I get to decide what happens next. There's nothing weak about feeling embarrassed. There's nothing shameful about freezing in front of a crowd. That's called being human. The power comes in what you choose to do with that moment. Do you bury it, deny it, and let it fester? Or do you hold it with compassion, examine it, and turn it into something meaningful? When you own your story, even the hard chapters, you take back authority. You refuse to let someone else define your worth or control the narrative. You say, I was there. I know what I felt, I know what I deserve, and I don't need anyone's permission to speak my truth or stand in my dignity. And something amazing happens when we do this. People see us differently, not because we fought back with clever insults, but because we didn't disappear. We stayed, we processed, we grew, we allowed ourselves to be seen in the moment of pain, and we kept showing up. That's how respect starts to return. Not all at once, but steadily, because we're no longer hiding from our story. Let's be honest, when someone humiliates us in front of others, whether it's a snide comment in a meeting, a personal jab at a party, or a full-blown verbal attack, our first reaction is not usually calm or gracious. It's heat, it's fire, it's a deep, aching desire to strike back, to make them feel what they just made us feel. That's our survival system kicking in. That's our nervous system saying, you're under attack, do something. And it's completely human. But here's the thing, that moment, that split second between the hurt and the reaction is where our power lives. We don't always talk about that power. It's quieter than rage, less flashy than a comeback, but it's what separates a reactive life from a grounded one. It's in that sacred pause that we decide who we really are, not just who we are when everything's going well, but who we are when we're publicly disrespected, when the room is watching, when our pride feels like it's on the floor. In that moment, we have two choices. We can react from the wound, or we can respond from our values. Reacting from the wound often feels satisfying in the short term. Maybe we say something sharp that gets a laugh. Maybe we fire back with sarcasm or shut down completely or stew in silence. But in the aftermath, when the adrenaline fades, we're usually left with regret. Not because we didn't have a right to be angry, but because we didn't act in a way that honored who we want to be. Letting integrity lead doesn't mean being passive. It doesn't mean letting people walk all over you. It means choosing yourself over the emotional chaos of someone else's behavior. It means saying, I will not allow you to drag me into the mud with you. I can be clear, I can be firm, and I can be kind all at once. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. That kind of self-control takes practice. It takes breath. It takes the willingness to feel everything, rage, humiliation, sadness, without immediately turning those feelings into weapons. The pause isn't empty, it's full of clarity. In that space, you can ask, what outcome do I want here? Will this reaction reflect the kind of respect I want to earn? Am I acting from my center or from my wound? When you give yourself that pause and then choose to respond from a place of integrity, even if it's later, even if it's a quiet conversation and not a public clapback, you show a kind of strength that's not performative but deeply powerful. People notice, people remember, because anyone can shout, anyone can mock, but it takes real courage to stay rooted in who you are when someone else tries to knock you off balance. So let them flail, let them try to pull you into chaos. You pause, you breathe, and then you respond, not from fear or ego, but from grounded self-respect. That's how dignity is restored. Would you like me to continue with the next point? Speak the truth calmly and clearly. There's a moment after public humiliation when your voice feels like it's been stolen. Maybe you froze. Maybe you didn't have the words. Maybe you laughed it off to avoid the awkward silence. Or maybe you simply walked away, heart pounding, trying to make sense of what just happened. And later, when you're lying awake or standing in the shower, you think of the perfect thing you should have said. You rehearse it, you relive it, and part of you feels small for not having said it in the moment. And let me say this plainly, not speaking up right away doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. When we're blindsided, when we're hurt, when we're shamed in front of others, our body goes into protection mode. Our nervous system locks down, our brain floods. We lose access to clarity, to composure, to language, and that's okay. What matters is not whether you spoke in the heat of the moment. What matters is that you eventually do. Speaking your truth isn't about winning. It's not about clever comebacks or public vindication. It's about honoring yourself enough to say, this is what happened, this is how it affected me, and this is what I need moving forward. That's courage, that's respect, that's leadership of your own life. It doesn't have to be loud, it doesn't have to be dramatic. In fact, some of the most powerful truths are spoken in quiet, steady tones. What makes them powerful isn't volume, it's clarity. Clarity like, when you said that in front of everyone, I felt disrespected and exposed. I deserve to be treated with dignity, even in disagreement. It's not okay to make a joke at my expense to get a laugh from the crowd. These aren't attacks, they're boundaries. And boundaries, when communicated with calm honesty, don't push people away. They teach people how to be in relationship with you. They say, you can know me, but only if you're willing to treat me with care. Here's the hard truth. People don't always like it when we speak up, especially when they've gotten used to us staying silent. But your truth isn't for their comfort, it's for your wholeness. There's risk involved. There always is. Some people will minimize what happened. Some may double down. Others might even be surprised because they didn't realize the impact of their words. But when you speak calmly and clearly, you anchor yourself in truth. And truth, even when uncomfortable, is where trust begins to grow, both the trust you have in yourself and the trust others begin to place in you. Because people watch how you handle moments like these. They watch how you use your voice, not to harm, not to shame, but to stand. And when they see that kind of grounded strength, respect follows, not always immediately. So take your time. Gather your words. Speak from your heart, not your hurt. Because your voice matters. And speaking the truth with calm clarity doesn't just reclaim your dignity, it reminds everyone watching that self-respect doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stand firm. After you've been publicly humiliated, it's natural to want to retreat, to shrink, to pull the curtain close and say, I just want to be alone. And for a while, that's okay. There's wisdom in protecting your heart when it's still raw. There's strength in pausing to catch your breath. But here's the hard truth. If you stay isolated too long, shame will start to write your story for you. Shame whispers lies in silence. It tells you that you are stupid or weak or deserving of what happened. It exaggerates the moment until it feels like the only thing that defines you. And if you don't let someone else speak into that silence, you may begin to believe it. That's why we need brave, loving witnesses, not people who fix, not people who downplay it, not people who rush to say it's not that big of a deal. We need people who can sit with us in the discomfort and still see our worth. People who say, I saw what happened, and I still see you clearly, wholly, and with love. These are the friends who don't flinch when you share your shame. The mentors who remind you of your strength when you've temporarily lost access to it. The partners, siblings, or even kind strangers who help you remember this one moment doesn't get to define your whole story. They're your mirrors when your own reflection feels cracked. And yes, choosing who gets to hear your story matters. Vulnerability without discernment isn't courage, it's exposure. Not everyone deserves a front row seat to your healing, but the right people, the ones who've earned the right to hear your truth, they're oxygen in moments when you can't breathe. You don't need a crowd, you just need a few good ones. The brave witnesses in your life don't need you to be perfect. They don't need you to explain every emotion. They just need you to show up, to say, here's what I'm carrying, and I don't want to carry it alone anymore. And here's the beautiful part. When we allow ourselves to be witnessed in our pain, it creates intimacy, it deepens trust, it reminds us that respect isn't always rebuilt in grand gestures, it's rebuilt in quiet connection. And the text that says, I believe you, in the coffee shop conversation that ends with, you didn't deserve that. In the simple, consistent presence of someone who sees past your worst day and still calls you courageous. Because courage isn't just what happens on the outside, it's what happens when someone says you're not alone and you believe them. So find those people, lean into them, let them remind you that your value was never up for debate, no matter how someone tried to strip it from you. And when you've healed enough, when your voice steadies again, become that kind of witness for someone else, because that's how dignity is restored, not just in ourselves, but in community, in connection, in being seen, loved, and held exactly as we are, even in our most vulnerable moments. One of the hardest things to do after public humiliation is to walk back into the same room where it happened, the same office, the same group chat, the same community space, the same circle of people who witnessed your most vulnerable, most unguarded moment. Your instinct might scream at you to avoid it, to reroute your life just far enough to never have to feel that kind of exposure again. And honestly, that would be understandable. Pain avoidance is one of the most human instincts we have. But here's what I've learned about courage. Courage doesn't mean you're not scared. Courage means you show up scared, but you show up anyway. When someone humiliates you in public, whether intentionally or carelessly, it does more than bruise your ego. It threatens your belonging. It creates a rupture in the space you thought was safe. And that rupture can feel like a signal that you no longer have a place there. But the truth is, you never lost your worth in that room. Someone else just failed to see it. The moment you decide to show up, again, not to prove anything, not to perform, but to simply be present, you take back territory that shame tried to claim. You send a quiet but powerful message. I may have been hurt, but I am not erased. I may have been disrespected, but I am not invisible. And let's be clear, this doesn't mean showing up as if nothing happened. This doesn't mean pretending to be over it when you're not. Showing up with courage means walking in with your humanity intact. You don't need to armor up. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be honest and brave enough to stay. It might mean walking into the meeting and holding your head a little higher. It might mean speaking up in the group even when your voice shakes. It might mean choosing to stay in the conversation instead of retreating. It might mean asking for a one-on-one with the person who hurt you, not to shame them, but to speak your truth and reclaim your power. None of this is easy. In fact, it might be one of the hardest things you ever do. But here's what's waiting on the other side. Dignity, self-trust, quiet confidence, and slowly respect, real respect starts to gather around you. Not because you demanded it, but because you earned it in the most meaningful way through vulnerability, resilience, and the refusal to disappear. People are moved by the ones who return, not with vengeance, but with grace. The ones who rise. Not perfectly, but honestly. The ones who say, you may have seen me fall, but now you'll see me stand. This is the kind of strength that can't be faked. It's not loud, it's not shiny, but it is unforgettable. And over time, people remember not just what happened to you, but how you carried yourself afterward. So if you're scared to re-enter the space, you're not alone. But know this, every time you show up again with trembling hands and an open heart, you are rebuilding your sense of self, brick by brick, breath by breath. And that is nothing short of heroic. In the aftermath of public humiliation, when you've been the target of someone else's cruelty or disrespect, there's often pressure to respond with force, to get loud, to fight back, to show everyone, including the one who hurt you, that you are not someone to mess with. We live in a world that often equates strength with volume, with retaliation, with snapping back fast and hard, especially in public spaces. And if you don't do that, if you choose stillness, reflection, restraint, you might hear people whisper that you're too soft, too passive, or too forgiving. Let me be clear, quiet strength is not weakness. Quiet strength is wisdom. And in many cases, it takes more courage to stay grounded than to react. Quiet strength is the power to feel your pain without projecting it onto others. It's the courage to take a breath before you speak, especially when your pride has just been bruised. It's the decision to process before you perform. It's the ability to sit with discomfort instead of rushing to escape it. That kind of strength doesn't show up as a clapback or a call out. It shows up in presence. It shows up in the way you walk into a room after being wounded and still choose to carry yourself with dignity. It shows up in how you listen without folding, how you set boundaries without burning bridges, how you stay kind without being naive. Quiet strength is what allows you to be stronger than your reaction. It is the choice to honor your integrity more than your impulse. And here's the thing, people who rely on fear and volume to command attention rarely understand this kind of strength. They may try to provoke you. They may say things like, why didn't you say something? Or you let them walk all over you. But the ones who really see you, the ones who've done their own work, will recognize the depth of your restraint as a sign of character, not submission. Because real power is not performative. It doesn't need to convince anyone. It doesn't puff up to take space. It's the calm in the storm, the steady voice in chaos. The eye contact that says, I'm not going to match your disrespect with my own. And let's be honest, being quiet doesn't always feel good in the moment. Sometimes you'll question yourself. You'll wonder if you looked weak for not snapping back. You might even feel regret. But what you're doing is building something far more sustainable, self-respect.